My wife was crying, and a lot of women were crying. Imagine seeing your own kids sleeping on the floor. Why can't they get them a room and a bed?
If there was ever an all hands on deck moment, this is it. This is it.
We're very concerned about the safety and well-being of these individuals who are coming to our state. And we're working closely with the city of New York to get them supportive housing and to meet their needs.
What does it take to get a more in-depth look into the week's top local news stories? The Debrief brings you inside for a one-on-one conversation with our reporters every week, right here, right now. The Debrief.
Hello everyone, David Ushery here with News 4 Government Affairs reporter Melissa Russo, who recently has been doing some deep dive reporting on what has been a national issue, but we learned recently it has touched this tri-state in a significant way. We're talking about a surge of asylum seekers. Melissa, tell us about your reporting. What is happening right now with these migrants who are coming largely from Venezuela?
They're coming across the border from Venezuela into Texas and Arizona, and what's different now is that they're being sent to New York. So now suddenly New York is in the position of receiving the number started about 10 days ago as a 2,800 estimate, and more recently Mayor Adams said it's more like 4,000 of these migrants. Many of them are families, some of them are single adults, and they are coming into our homeless shelter system, which is already crowded.
Right.
So it's creating pressure on the city, on our social service systems. The families are not set up with regular food programs. They're not entitled to food stamps or public assistance, even though they are here legally. So, it's becoming a bit of a crisis.
So the mayor, from your reporting, tries to get out in front of it, makes the announcement, and then, of course, you doing your due diligence, you start to peel away the layers, and there are the complexities to the issue. The mayor announces, advocates say, hold on. Walk us through that.
Well, it started as an issue where Mayor Adams came out and said, hey, federal government, we need help. Send us money if you want us to take care of these people. We're happy to have them. We need money. Then I have been covering homelessness a long time. Yes. We managed to find some of these families and talk to them about what they were experiencing. We learned that some of the families in the system were hungry because the shelters and the hotels where they were staying temporarily don't always serve 3 meals a day, because a lot of our local homeless are on food stamps or public assistance. They can afford to buy food. These folks don't work, so it's a little bit of a different situation. And then I had a family tell me, first one family, but then other families, that they were remaining sleeping on floors and benches in the intake office, which we know from the history of covering homelessness in New York City is a very taboo subject. It's illegal. It's been the subject of major court battles for many mayors. And it sort of had stopped for at least 10 or 12 years. It's the first time we've heard of this happening. And then more recently, we started reporting on the fact that when these folks are put on a bus in Texas and sent to New York, they're given a form. And we found out and reported that Border Patrol agents in Texas were putting sort of random arbitrary addresses on these forms, handing them to the migrants. The migrants show up here, and then when they get here, they find out that these places are actually office buildings. They might be charities. It looks like someone made an effort to find a charity.
But not set up to take in
Not
families.
Set up to take people. So
These
it's
are
like
administrative
it's an administrative office, or it's a women's shelter that can't take men and children. So it's not, if you were trying to plan this out and give people a heads up and make sure they have a good landing here, that's not where you'd send them.
So we have dual tracks here. We have the city response first, which initially the Adams administration defended its response so far, saying, hey, we've been hit with a tsunami here.
They did. They said we've been hit with a tsunami, and they also only admitted to illegal violations with, keeping families overnight in their system involving 4 families, and they insist that that's still the case.
Your homeless advocate sources said what, however?
The homeless advocate sources were suspicious of the mayor's announcement from the beginning because they, when they heard that there was a 2,800 person bump over a 6-week period, they thought it was odd since it doesn't seem to be reflected in the data that the city releases every day. It's called the census. City puts it out every day. They didn't see the kind of bump that would reflect this sort of surge. And they thought maybe the mayor was trying to deflect from some other bureaucratic and management issues which are causing a bottleneck in the system. More families coming in because, of course, rents are so high right now. The eviction moratorium stopped. You have more families coming in, but fewer families moving out into permanent housing, causing sort of a bottleneck. And that was a pre-existing condition before we started seeing these migrants.
And what are they saying now that they've looked at it and you've reported on it?
Well, now they're still sort of saying that there needs to be accountability. They called for city council hearings, which are now going to happen in early August. They have given some credit to City Hall for cleaning up the front end of the homeless shelter intake office system. They are no longer sleeping on the floors and benches overnight to the extent that they were before. Yeah. So that's an improvement. And I think, the City Hall has said, these legal advocates, the Legal Aid Society in particular, instead of criticizing us, we wish they would come with us and lobby the federal government for more help so we can manage it. Now what we've learned and also reported is that the Adams administration is looking to open a service center or a welcome center here in New York, similar to the kind of welcome center we see, say, in San Antonio.
Okay. A
place where they can do one-stop shopping and get some of the confusion cleared up.
And I know you continue to reporting on this in terms of the Customs and Border Patrol and where they're sending them with these addresses.
Right.
Have we been able to get a response on that yet? And we know you're going to continue to report on it.
They know we're working on it. They're aware of our reporting on it. They've also been alerted by Charities who have been encountering this. Charities who are very upset because they're getting mail for hundreds of migrants whose whereabouts they don't know. Okay. And this is the kind of mail that tells them show up in court or you could get deported. And so, Catholic Charities, national organization, I was told, had reached out to Customs and Border Patrol. I don't think we're the only people that have alerted them about this, though City Hall tells us they were unaware of it. So, we're waiting for a response from Customs and Border Patrol as to why this might be happening.
Sitting on a sidewalk in the South Bronx, worlds away from their home in Venezuela, a family waits for a better life. 14 days ago, Edgar Bracamonte crossed the Mexican border into Arizona, then boarded a bus to New York. He says he's in search of a better future for his children, and he's holding on to hope, trying to stay patient and calm. Edgar is one of thousands of migrants who have arrived here on the doorstep of the New York City homeless shelter system in recent weeks, an unanticipated stop in a quest for political asylum.
But we do need help to deal with this new wave of those who are in need of shelter.
Mayor Eric Adams this morning announced that 2,800 migrants like Edgar have flooded into the city's already crowded homeless shelter system in the past 6 weeks. He says border states like Texas and Arizona are shipping the migrants here because New York, unlike other states, has a right to shelter, meaning they won't turn people away.
We need some of those states that have been giving people one-way tickets. We need them to understand that this must be a partnership.
The mayor wants the federal government now to send resources to support the influx of asylum seekers, something local homeless people think is a good idea.
At least give some money with it, because it's already like turmoil for the people that's from the city.
They want to help people, but it's not easy.
In a bizarre twist today, the border states pushed back against the mayor. Texas and Arizona denying they're sending any migrants to New York, adding they've only sent some on buses to Washington, D.C. They say Mayor Adams needs to get his facts straight and pay closer attention to what's really occurring. Edgar says it was a church, not the state of Arizona, that paid his family's bus fare to New York, and while they wait to be placed in a temporary shelter, his 10-year-old son, Otonio, told me his family's dream is to have stability here and to be able to eat. He says there has not been enough food in the shelter so far. I asked Mayor Adams how the city is ensuring these families have their basic needs met.
There you are. You are hitting on those topics of why we're reaching out to the federal government and stating this is a real burden on New Yorkers.
A man who walked by as we were interviewing Edgar was kind enough to take the family up the block and buy them some lunch. Meanwhile, the White House says they're considering Mayor Eric Adams' request for financial help. In the South Bronx, Melissa Russo, News 4 New York. Outside the intake center for New York City's homeless shelter system, Leonardo and Luisandra are leaning on each other after a traumatic 6-month migration to the U.S., finally landing on U.S. soil earlier this month in Texas. We're a poor family, says this father of 4, explaining why they left Venezuela. We can't even stay nourished. We don't even have running water. The level of poverty they've experienced at home pales in comparison with most residents in the city's shelters. But even so, today, as they make their way through the bureaucracy, they say they still don't have quite enough food. They're given 2 small sandwiches a day, and their 3-year-old son is dehydrated after getting just 1 small juice box. Mayor Eric Adams Tuesday announced that 2,800 migrants like Leonardo have flooded the city's already crowded shelter system in the past 6 weeks after obtaining one-way bus tickets in border states where these asylum seekers aren't welcome. The mayor is asking the federal government for financial help.
El gobernador de Texas no quiere entrar los más inmigrantes.
Leonardo says he was told the Texas governor doesn't want immigrants there. He boarded a bus first to Washington, then another to New York, paid for by local churches. Now, he says, his family has spent the past 5 nights sleeping in the lobby of this New York City homeless intake office. If that's the case, it's a violation of a 2008 court settlement requiring the provision of proper shelter in New York. Today, he says, he was finally offered a room in a Rockaway shelter 90 minutes away and a deadline to get there, but no car fare or MetroCard.
And of my knowledge, we don't have families that are living overnight.
The mayor and some migrants are not telling the same story. Leonardo Mayorga told me when his family arrived at the entry point of the city's homeless shelter system on July 15th, they slept for 5 nights straight on the floor of the office building lobby.
The people said that there was no space. There was a lot of people on the floor.
Leonardo documented his 6-month journey from Venezuela. It included 9 days in the Panama jungle witnessing atrocities, migrants who didn't make it, and sleepless nights outdoors as he watched to be sure his 3-year-old son would sleep safely. After enduring all that, sleeping in a crowded but air-conditioned city waiting room in the South Bronx might not have seemed so bad. He documented that, too. But what Leonardo did not know is that housing families in this office is both illegal in New York and taboo. There have been decades of court battles over deplorable conditions. Mayors of the past have been found in contempt of court, subject to fines, and the practice basically stopped a decade ago.
We violated the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law, we got people housing.
I met many families this morning who slept overnight at PAP. And it does not show any sign of abating. My client who was there Tuesday night reported there were 20 other families sleeping overnight with her that night.
Now the Legal Aid Society is threatening to sue, accusing Mayor Adams of exaggerating the migrant crisis to cover for deteriorating conditions and mismanagement in his shelter system. They say the influx of migrants is not to blame. Mayor Adams insists no families stayed at the path for multiple days at a time and that the city only broke the rules for 4 families who slept in the office. Leonardo says there were around 80 people when he stayed there, and he's not the only one. Angelica Mendoza says her family slept on the chairs of the lobby of PATH since Monday. I questioned Mayor Adams about why families would say they're sleeping here if they're not.
We're not aware of those cases. And if you're an excellent reporter. So if you see cases like that, please let us know, because that is not who we are. And that is not what this administration is about. If there was ever an all hands on deck moment, this is it. This is it.
Mayor Adams says he needs both federal funding and empathy from New Yorkers to manage what he calls a massive new influx of Central and South American migrants.
We all must share the crises.
But the mayor's critics say the crisis has two parts. One is migrants being sent to the city without a plan and showing up here in our shelter system. Two, they say, are problems in the shelter system that predated the migrants, like not enough beds, staff shortages, and too little permanent housing, so that people come into the system but can't move out. Last week, we first reported families have been backed up at the system's intake office, sleeping on the floor and chairs for days at a time, which is against the law.
My wife was crying, and a lot of women were crying. Imagine seeing your own kids sleeping on the floor. Why can't they get them a room and a bed?
We're very concerned about the safety and well-being of these individuals who are coming to our state. And we're working closely with the city of New York to get them supportive housing and to meet their needs.
Today, Governor Kathy Hochul said the state is stepping in to help.
It's an interesting story and great reporting by NBC on it.
And Hochul's Republican rival, Lee Zeldin, said both the mayor and his critics are right.
I will not say that Mayor Adams is wrong. I would strongly agree with him that it's absolutely been exacerbated. And I would say that the Legal Aid Society is also correct in saying that this wasn't an issue that just popped up overnight. It's been around for a while.
In a statement today calling for public hearings, Shahana Hanif, who chairs the City Council's Immigration Committee, says we cannot lay the blame of this mayoral administration to build adequate and affordable housing on the feet of people fleeing violence from other countries.
The Legal Aid Society says they're hopeful that council hearings could yield some answers. They're saying they need assurances that meaningful action will be underway to ensure all families, including those seeking asylum, have unfettered access to shelter as prescribed by the law. Melissa Russo, News 4, New York.
Yeah, this is the first time we've become aware of this, and we're going to zero in on it.
Mayor Adams wants to learn more about why some families, like the Urbaezes from Venezuela, are finding themselves lost and living on the streets of the city.
It is better not to be in the street.
Aquí vamos pasando la última montaña.
After weeks of walking through the jungle with their children and their dog,
the hardest thing for us was starving, was living through heavy rainfall, living through the strong sun, walking with the kids.
The Urbaez family crossed the border into Texas, where they say federal officials told them their future would be brighter in New York. Their official papers from Border Patrol directed them to 409 West 40th Street. But when they arrived at that destination,
a family came knocking at our door, 409.
They learned this was not a family shelter that could take them in.
It's not helping for a family who's struggling already.
Maria Vergara says she tried to redirect them to the shelter system, but they say they ended up lost and eventually sleeping in a Good Samaritan's car before finding their way to the entry point of the shelter system in the Bronx, 151 East 151st Street. That's the address that should be on those forms, but it's not.
They're just kind of being dropped off in random locations.
Destinations like 1011 First Avenue, which is the headquarters for Catholic Charities here, but not a shelter.
Keep in mind, this is an office that houses our Human Resources Department, our Finance Department, payroll.
Other families were sent to 80 Maiden Lane, another office building with no services like food or beds. City officials say they're planning to build a service center in the coming weeks to help meet the needs of the migrants and cut down on confusion.
We want to ensure that the families are receiving the services that they deserve, and that is shelter. This is a right to shelter city.
But the I-Team has learned the federal government is not just sending migrants to the wrong addresses. Now they're sending their mail there, too.
1011 First Avenue, New York, New York. 1011 First Avenue, New York, New York. 1011 First Avenue, New York, New York.
Immigration lawyer Marianne Therapel at Catholic Charities showed us stacks of important mail from immigration sent to her office, telling the asylum seekers when and where to appear in court. The letters say if they don't show up, they could be taken into custody or even removed from the country.
It's absolutely unacceptable.
All right, well, this has been some great deep dive journalism on an issue that's going to be with us for a while. So to complement our on-air newscasts and Melissa's reporting, you can always go to NBCNewYork.com for the updates that will continue to come. Great reporting, Melissa.
Thank you, David.